Jeffrey Epstein has been quite a hot topic lately.
Of Jeffrey Epstein.
Discussing the Epstein story.
The Jeffrey Epstein Island.
Talking about Jeffrey Epstein.
Yes.
And that's
Jeffrey Epstein.
For Jeffrey Epstein.
And last week, I made a video covering why I believe Epstein was an intelligence agency operative. So if that sounds interesting to you, make sure to check that out. So while we're on the intelligence operative storyline here, let's talk about the Epstein of the 1950s, Mr. Eli Cohen. Eli Cohen was a Zionist from Egypt. Born in 1924, he studied electrical engineering at the University of Cairo. When Israel became a nation in 1948, Cohen joined an underground network of Zionists who snuck Jews out of Egypt and into Israel and gathered intelligence on Egyptian military activities. In 1954, Egypt, Israel's main regional threat, seemed to have been developing good relationships with the West, which Israel saw as a threat. At this time, the Israeli Intelligence Directorate began planning covert operations to sabotage these warming relationships. And Operation Susannah, better known now as the Lavon Affair, was launched. Israeli intelligence officer Avraham Dar recruited members of the underground Zionist movements and trained them in covert operations. These operatives placed bombs at American information libraries in Cairo and Alexandria, British-owned cinemas and cultural centers, railway stations, and post offices. The goal of the failed operation was to blame the terrorist attacks on radical Islamic groups, such as the Muslim Brotherhood, and sour the relationship between Egypt and the West, framing Egypt as an unstable ally. Thankfully, the operation went awry. Of the 9 bombs planted, only 3, some sources say 4, of the bombs actually went off, and thankfully there were no fatalities. There were some injuries and property damage. This was largely due to the fact that the bombs were designed to create panic and chaos, but not specifically to kill. They were small incendiary devices. This never made major headlines in the United States, and Israel never officially took responsibility. And within Israel, it remained unclear whether the operation was sanctioned by top leadership or carried out by a rogue element within military intelligence. Secondly, several major news outlets in the United States during that period were owned or led by individuals of Jewish descent, some of whom were sympathetic toward Israel. For example, the New York Times was owned by the Sulzberger family, who were Jewish but generally cautious about openly supporting Zionism at the time. The Washington Post was acquired by Eugene Meyer, a Jewish banker with Zionist sympathies, and later run by his daughter, Katharine Graham. After these attacks, Egypt became more suspicious of the underground Zionist networks in its country. And although Eli Cohen was never directly implicated in the Lavon Affair, he came under heavy scrutiny shortly after. He was arrested and questioned several times about the incident and the Zionist underground's activities in Egypt. A couple of years after the Lavon incident in 1956, there was a secret meeting between Israeli, French, and British military intelligence agencies
And no one else is in the room if it happens.
in Ra, a suburb outside of Paris, France. The Cold War was going on at this time, and the president of Egypt, Gamal Nasser, managed to irritate France, Britain, and Israel. At the time, and to this day, the Suez Canal was located in Egypt, but owned and occupied by the Franco-British Suez Canal Company. Nasser was working on this big project to build the Aswan High Dam, which was a huge deal for Egypt at the time. Egypt was promised funding assistance from Britain and France, but Britain and France refused to fund it after Nasser recognized communist China as a country. Nasser was furious. He already didn't like that the British and French controlled the Suez Canal and felt that it was a symbol of Western imperialism, but now he threatened to expel the British and French forces from the Suez Canal and charged tolls to enter through it. Nasser argued that the funding for the dam would come from the tolls extracted at the Suez Canal. Politics are complicated, and there were other reasons for the French and British ire towards Nasser. One of them being Nasser funding the militia attempting to expel the French colonialists from the country of Algeria. Israel had its reasons as well. Nasser issued strict trading restrictions on the young state, not allowing them to sail trading ships through the Straits of Tiran, essentially cutting off Israel's access to the Red Sea and hindering the country's economy. Nasser also allowed the Gazan Fedayeen militia to regularly raid Israel through Gaza, which was controlled by Egypt at the time. But whatever the reasons were, Britain, France, and Israel met on October 22nd of 1956, discussing plans to overthrow Egypt's president, Gamal Sir. The plan was to have Israel attack Egypt through the Sinai Peninsula. After initially capturing some territory, Britain and France planned to issue an ultimatum to stop fighting and withdraw all military forces from the Suez Canal area. If it went according to plan, Egypt would refuse to stop fighting since they were the ones who were attacked in the first place, and Britain and France would then join the conflict, and Nasser would be overthrown as Egypt was invaded by 3 countries. A week after the clandestine meeting in France, on October 29th of 1956, Israel launched Operation Kadesh. The Israeli army quickly seized the peninsula, and their forces were rapidly approaching the Suez Canal. Within 4 days, Israeli forces successfully captured Sharm el-Sheikh, effectively reopening the Straits of Tiran and reinstating Israel's access to the Red Sea. On October 31st, France and Britain issued their ultimatum, as planned. When Egypt refused to withdraw their troops from the Suez Canal area, France and Britain began bombing Egyptian airfields throughout the country and deployed troops to Port Said and Point Fuad, effectively capturing the northern entrance to the Suez Canal. It all seemed to be going according to plan, except instead of popular opinion going against President Nasser, the citizens of Egypt rallied behind. United States President Dwight Eisenhower was furious at being kept in the dark, and the Soviet Union threatened to intervene militarily on Egypt's behalf. In 1957, a ceasefire ensued. Israel gave Sinai and Gaza back to Egypt, and Egypt allowed Israel to sail trading ships through the Straits of Tiran. After French, British, and Israeli withdrawal, Egypt maintained control of the Suez Canal. If you want me to do a full-length video covering the 1956 Egypt-Israeli crisis or other Mossad scandals, let me know in the comments section below. That brings us back to our main topic of discussion, Eli Cohen. After the Lavon Affair and the Suez Canal War, it was unsafe for many Jews in Egypt. Eli Cohen moved to Israel sometime between late 1956 and early 1957. Eli originally struggled to find work and felt that his experience in the Zionist underground may be valuable in military intelligence. Eli applied to join the Mossad, but was initially rejected. Sometime in the year of 1960, Israel's military intelligence recognized the need for agents who were fluent in Arabic to infiltrate hostile Arab countries. Eli Cohen was recruited to join the Mossad. But before going to the regime Israel wanted Cohen to infiltrate, Cohen was reworked altogether. Eli Cohen was renamed Kamal Amin Thabat, and Mossad fitted him with a backstory. They sent him to Argentina and gave him millions. The story became that Eli, or Amin Thabat, was a billionaire who was originally from Syria but grew up in Argentina. He threw lavish parties to attract real Syrian Argentinians, and after being fitted with a backstory, moved to Damascus and purchased a property next to a military headquarters. While in Syria, Eli continued to pose as a billionaire and threw parties involving alcohol, which was frowned upon in Syria. And some accounts say that the billionaire used young women to entrap Syria's celebrity and military elite. In fact, Eli became so trusted in Syria that he befriended Aminal, who later became Syria's president, as well as Hafez, who ruled Syria for decades. Cohen was even considered for top government positions, such as the Deputy Minister of Defense, and was urged by many of his Syrian friends to make a run for parliament. During his time in Syria, Cohen would visit military locations and underground areas around the Golan Heights, the border between Syria and Israel, and take detailed notes. He reported via radio Syrian troop positions, fortifications, and even informed Israel of a type of tree that Syria grew near its military bunkers to provide shade. General Avraham Yoff in the 1967 war between Syria and Israel is quoted as saying, "The eucalyptus trees gave them away." That idea came from Eli Cohen. Cohen is actually credited for Israel's military victory over Syria, and some believe that Israel would have lost the Six-Day War of 1967 without Cohen's information. However, on January 24th of 1965, Syrian security forces raided Cohen's Damascus apartment. With KGB-loaned equipment, Cohen's radio transmissions to Israeli intelligence officials were discovered. And on May 18th of 1965, Cohen was publicly executed in Syria. And Cohen was well connected. The French president and even the Pope tried to save his life, but to no avail. After Cohen's death, the Mossad was desperate to recover the materials that Cohen had possession of, including a list of names of people in the Syrian government that he was blackmailing, what their weaknesses were, and things he had over them. The Mossad launched a commando raid near the Syrian border, but the items the Mossad was after in its 1965 raid were gone, moved to a secret location in Damascus, possibly even being protected by the Soviet. In 1970, 5 years after Cohen's death, the Syrian regime was overthrown by one of Cohen's former contacts, Mossad. For years, people were fascinated with, suspicious of, and the public really hoped that Maher al-Assad would release Cohen's list, but he didn't. Instead, the dictator used the list as a powerful bargaining tool. It was hard for him to keep power over Syria. There were many rival military figures who wanted to take control over the unstable country. However, with possession of the list, Maher had total control. If anyone on the list opposed him, he could completely destroy them by releasing their names as co-conspirators or traitors. And with the list in hand, Assad had total control over Syria for his entire lifetime. In 2025, after the fall of al-Assad's son, Bashar, an unorganized group of militias took control of the country. Not long after this, Israeli special forces launched a raid into the country, recovering over 2,500 items belonging to Eli Cohen, including, most likely, Eli Cohen's list. The question remains, what was on that list? Why did it guarantee enough as a day control of the Syrian state? And why, after 50 years, did Israeli special forces launch a daring raid into Syria to recover it?